I am Lisa.
And I'm Eric. Do you want to improve your English easily? If so, you're in the right place.
So let's get started and make English easy. So Eric, what are the words today?
The first word today is ordinary. Then we will continue with consequently and to blame. Then to walk out on. And the final one is in the heat of the moment.
Okay, let's start with the first word.
The first word is ordinary.
Ordinary.
Ordinary is an adjective, and it means something normal or not special. When something is ordinary, it's common, usual, or just like many other things. Here's an example sentence. The restaurant was nice, but the food was just ordinary. It means that the food wasn't special or amazing. It was normal, like what you would find in many other restaurants.
That's a good example. Here's another one. She wore an ordinary dress to the party, nothing too fancy. It means that the dress was simple and normal, not very fancy or different from what most people wear.
Good example. So you can use it for almost anything, people, places, clothes, or even events. It's a very flexible word. Now, let's practice using ordinary in a short dialogue. Are you ready, Lisa?
I'm ready. Let's go.
How was your weekend?
It was pretty ordinary. I just stayed home and watched TV.
That sounds relaxing. Sometimes an ordinary weekend is exactly what you need.
Yeah, nothing special. But it was nice.
In this dialogue, Emma describes her weekend as ordinary because she didn't do anything special. She just stayed home and relaxed.
Ordinary is a great word to use when you want to say something is normal or usual, and it's often used in casual conversations like this. Eric, do you think ordinary is a formal or informal word?
I'd say it's pretty neutral. You can use ordinary in both formal and informal situations. In everyday conversations, people might say, it was just an ordinary day. But in formal writing or speeches, you can also use it, like, he lived an ordinary life.
I agree. It's a very common word that fits in many different situations. Do you think ordinary is a positive or negative word?
It really depends on the situation. Sometimes ordinary can be neutral or even positive, like in our dialogue where Emma had a nice, relaxing weekend. But other times, ordinary might be negative, like when people want something special or different.
I think that's right. Sometimes ordinary is perfectly fine, but other times people want something more exciting or unique. So, listeners, if you want to describe something normal or usual, ordinary is the word to use. Well, I think that's it for today's word, ordinary. Okay, shall we move on to the next word, Eric?
Yes, let's do it. The next word is consequently.
Consequently.
Consequently is an adverb. It's used to show that something happened as a result of something else. It's similar to the phrase as a result or so. When you use consequently, you are explaining that one thing caused another thing to happen.
Let's give some examples so that our listeners understand better. Could you start, Eric?
Sure, Lisa. Here's the first example sentence. He didn't study for the exam. Consequently, he failed. This means that because he didn't study, he failed the exam. Consequently shows the connection between not studying and failing.
Great example, Eric. Here's mine. It rained all morning. Consequently, the game was canceled. It means that because it rained all morning, the game couldn't happen, so it was canceled. The cancellation was a result of the rain.
Great. And here's a quick grammar tip. Consequently usually comes at the beginning of the second part of the sentence. It helps connect two ideas and explain the cause and effect. For example, the road was icy. Consequently, there were many accidents.
That's a good point, Eric. Now let's practice using consequently in a short conversation. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
We didn't get the materials on time. Consequently, we had to delay the project.
Yes, and consequently, we missed the deadline. We really need to be more organized next time.
In this conversation, John uses consequently to explain why they had to delay the project. It was because they didn't get the materials on time.
Right. Consequently is a great word to show cause and effect in situations like this. Eric, do you think consequently is more formal or informal?
I'd say it's definitely more formal. You might use it in essays, reports, or professional emails. In casual conversations, most people would probably just say so or because of that. For example, I woke up late, so I missed my meeting.
I agree. It's very common in written English, like in academic writing or official documents. Do you think it's a difficult word for learners?
It can be tricky at first, but once you understand that, it's just another way to say because of that or so.
That's a good way to put it. So, listeners, when you want to explain that something happened as a result of something else, and you want to sound a bit more formal, remember to use consequently. It's a great word for more professional or serious situations.
Exactly, and that wraps up our explanation of today's word, consequently.
Okay, let's move on to our next word. Eric, what's the next word?
The next word is to blame.
To blame.
To blame means to say or think that someone or something is responsible for a problem or bad situation.
That's right. We use it when we point out who or what caused something negative to happen.
Exactly. Let me give our first example sentence. The coach blamed the team's loss on poor training.
It means that, the coach said, the team lost because they didn't train well enough.
Good explanation. Now it's your turn, Lisa. Can you give us another example?
Sure. Here's another example. Don't blame me for the traffic. I didn't cause it.
It means that the person is saying they are not responsible for the traffic problem and others shouldn't say it's their fault.
Now, let's talk about how to use this word. Blame is a verb, and we often use it with for or on. For example, he blamed her for the mistake, or she blamed the accident on bad weather or on him.
Good point. Now, let's hear a short dialogue using the word blame.
The presentation didn't go as planned. What happened?
I don't know. Some people blame the new software, but I think we just needed more practice.
Yeah, I agree. I guess there's no one person to blame.
That was a good example. The word to blame was used a couple of times to show that people were trying to figure out who was responsible for the problem.
Exactly. It's a really useful phrase when something goes wrong. Lisa, do you think to blame is common in everyday conversation?
Oh, definitely. People use it all the time when they want to talk about responsibility.
What about being more formal or informal?
I'd say it's neutral. It works in both formal and informal situations. You might use it in everyday conversation like, don't blame me for this, or in more formal situations like at work or school when discussing problems.
I think so too. It's one of those words that you hear in both casual and serious conversations. People like to use it when they need to explain why something bad happened.
That's true. Well, I hope everyone understands to blame better now. It's a word you'll hear often.
Yep, let's move on to the next word. The next word is to walk out on.
To walk out on.
To walk out on is a phrasal verb. It means to leave someone or something suddenly, usually because you're angry or unhappy.
We use it when someone abandons a person, job, or situation in a sudden way.
Exactly. Let me give an example sentence. He walked out on his job after an argument with his boss.
It means that the person suddenly left his job because he had a fight with his boss.
Good explanation. Now it's your turn, Lisa. Can you give us another example?
Sure. Here's another example. She walked out on her husband after 10 years of marriage. It means that the woman suddenly left her husband and ended their marriage after 10 years.
That's right. Now, let's talk about how to use this phrase. Walk out on is always followed by a person or thing that is being left, like on someone or on something.
Now, let's hear a short dialogue using the phrase walk out on.
Did you hear about Tom?
No, what happened?
He walked out on the team right before the big game.
Really? Why would he do that?
I'm not sure, but I knew he had also walked out on his wife a few weeks ago.
I see. He must be going through hard times.
That was a useful example. It shows how walk out on can express disappointment or surprise at someone's actions.
Yes, and it also shows that it's often used to describe unexpected or dramatic situations.
Absolutely. So, Eric, do you think walk out on is a common phrase in English?
It's fairly common, especially in conversations about relationships or work situations.
That's true. Is it more formal or informal?
I would say it's more informal. We use it a lot in everyday speech, but probably not in formal writing. It's a colorful way to describe leaving a situation. It's more expressive than just saying leave or quit.
Exactly. Well, I think we've covered walk out on pretty well. Shall we move on to our next word?
Yes, let's do that. Remember, listeners, we hope you won't walk out on us before the end of the podcast.
Great reminder, Eric. Okay, what is the last word for today, Eric?
The last word today is in the heat of the moment.
In the heat of the moment.
In the heat of the moment is an idiom that means doing or saying something suddenly without thinking because you're feeling strong emotions, like anger, excitement, or stress.
Yes, it's used when someone acts quickly because they are upset, excited, or angry. It's like losing control for a short time. Now, let's give some example sentences. Eric, could you go ahead with the first one?
Sure, this is the first example sentence. I yelled at my friend in the heat of the moment, but I didn't mean to. It means that the person was angry or upset, and without thinking, they yelled at their friend. Later, they realized they didn't really want to yell, but it happened because of their strong emotions at that time.
Right. Here's another example. She quit her job in the heat of the moment, but now she regrets it. This means that she made a quick decision to leave her job because she was upset or stressed, but later she realized it wasn't the best choice. She acted without thinking, clearly.
Good example, Lisa. This idiom is informal. People often use this explanation when they regret or didn't plan something. It's not used in formal writing, but is common in everyday speech. Now, let's move on to a short dialogue to show how in the heat of the moment can be used in a conversation.
Did you hear about Sarah and Mike's fight last night?
No, what happened?
Well, in the heat of the moment, Sarah threw Mike's phone out the window.
Oh no, that's terrible.
She apologized and said she acted in the heat of the moment and feels really bad now.
I hope they can work things out.
That was a good example, Lisa. It shows how in the heat of the moment can explain sudden emotional actions.
Yes, and it also shows that people often regret things they do in the heat of the moment. So, Eric, do you think in the heat of the moment is a common phrase in English?
Absolutely. You'll hear it very often when someone explains why they acted a certain way in emotional situations. It's informal, so it's great for casual conversations, but not something you would write in a formal letter or report.
I agree. It's a very useful phrase because we all sometimes act quickly when we feel strong emotions.
Exactly. So remember, when you do something without thinking because of strong emotions, you can say it happened in the heat of the moment.
Okay. We hope you found the words today helpful. So, Eric, what are the words today?
The first word today is precious. Then we will continue with reputation and to involve. Then to weigh up. And the final one is in terms of something.
Okay, let's start with the first word.
The first word today is precious.
Precious.
Precious means very valuable or important, something that you love or care about very much.
When we say something is precious, we mean it's special and worth a lot to us.
Exactly. Let me give an example sentence. This ring is precious to me because it was my grandmother's.
It means that the ring is very important and valuable to the person because it belonged to their grandmother.
Good explanation. Now it's your turn, Lisa. Can you give us another example?
Sure. Here's another example. Time is precious, so don't waste it. It means that time is very valuable and important, so we should use it wisely and not waste it.
Perfect! So, as you can see, precious is used when talking about money or things that are valuable in meaning.
Yes, and precious is often used with things like jewelry, time, memories, or even people, when they are very special or important to us.
Now, let's have a look at a short dialogue to show how precious is used in a conversation.
Wow, that ring is beautiful. Is it new?
No, it's actually very old. It was my mother's and she gave it to me. It's really precious to me.
That's so special. You're lucky to have something so precious.
In this dialogue, Sophie says the ring is precious to her because it belonged to her mother. It's valuable because it's special to her, not because of money.
This shows that precious can describe things with a lot of emotional value.
Yes. So, Eric, would you say precious is a common word?
Yes, I'd say it's fairly common, especially when people talk about things that are important to them, like memories, people, or meaningful items. It's not a word you would use in casual conversations about everyday things, but when something has deep value, precious is a perfect word.
I agree. It's a bit more formal than words like special or valuable, but it adds a stronger sense of importance.
Absolutely. So, when you want to talk about something that is really important or special to you, you can say, it's precious.
Great advice. Well, that's all for the word precious. Let's move on to our next word.
The next word is reputation.
Reputation.
Reputation is a noun. It means the opinion that people have about someone or something. For example, if many people think you're honest and hardworking, you have a good reputation. But if people think you're untrustworthy, you have a bad reputation.
Yes, reputation is how people see you or what they think of you based on your actions, behavior, or even the things you've said.
Let's give some example sentences, Lisa. My sentence is, John has a good reputation because he is always helpful.
Great sentence. Could you explain it, Eric?
Sure. It means that people think John is a good person because he helps others. So, he has a good reputation.
It's my turn. The restaurant has a great reputation for its delicious food and excellent service. It means that people have good opinions about the restaurant. They believe it has high-quality food and service, so the restaurant has a good reputation.
Thanks for explaining, Lisa. Before we move on, let's talk about how we use reputation in sentences. Sometimes we say a reputation for something. For example, he has a reputation for being late. Here, for tells us why someone has a reputation.
Exactly. You can also say someone has a reputation as something. For example, she has a reputation as a great teacher. Here, as shows the role or quality that someone is known for.
Now, let's do a short dialogue using reputation.
Have you heard about the new cafe in town?
Yes, I've heard. It has a good reputation for its coffee.
Really? I thought. It had a bad reputation because some people said the service was slow.
Maybe it depends on the day, but I'm going to try it myself and see.
That was a good dialogue. The word reputation can be used in many situations, like talking about people, places, or even businesses. Now, let's have a little chat about the word. Do you think reputation is a formal or informal word?
I think reputation is a bit more formal. We often hear it in business or when talking about people more seriously, but you can still use it in casual conversations.
I agree. Reputation can help people make decisions about who to hire, where to eat, or even which products to buy.
Yes, and it's important because everyone has a reputation, even places like restaurants or stores. So it's a useful word to know. And remember, reputation can be good or bad.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we explained reputation pretty well, Eric. Let's move on to our next word.
Sure. The next word is involve.
Involve.
It's used a lot in English, and it has two meanings. The first meaning of involve is to include someone or something in an activity or situation. For example, if you are involved in a project, it means you are part of the project and doing something for it. The second meaning of involve is when something requires or needs certain actions. So, if something involves a lot of work, it means you need to do a lot of work to complete it.
Yes, it's very common in English. Let's start with the first meaning. Here's the first example sentence. The teacher involved the students in the discussion. It means that the teacher made the students join the discussion. The students are taking part in the conversation.
Now, for the second meaning, the job involves working late hours. This means that working late hours is part of the job. If you accept the job, you will have to work late as part of your responsibilities.
Let's talk a little more about how to use involve. It's a verb, and it's often followed by a noun or an activity. For example, involve people, or involve work in. When you're talking about activities, you often use the ing form of the verb, like involve working, involve studying, and so on.
Good point, Lisa. Now, let's do a short dialogue using the word involve with both meanings.
This new project sounds interesting. Will I be involved?
Yes. The boss has decided to involve you in the planning stage. It also involves working late hours, so be ready.
No problem. I'm happy to be involved with the project. We should also involve John in the project, I think.
Yes, why not? Let's talk about this later.
That was a great dialogue, Eric. Involve is such a flexible word with different uses, don't you think?
Yes, it really is. You can use it in so many situations.
Eric, do you think involve is common?
Definitely. Involve is very common, especially at work, school, or any activity that requires planning and teamwork. People often use it to talk about who should be included. Plus, the two meanings make it even more useful and common.
Well said, Eric. Okay, well, that's it for the word involve. We hope you have learned it well. Let's move on to our next word.
The next word is weigh up.
Weigh up.
Weigh up is a phrasal verb. It means to think carefully about the advantages and disadvantages of something before making a decision. For example, when you're trying to decide between two jobs, you weigh up the advantages and disadvantages of each job.
It's like comparing two or more things to see, which is better or more important. You weigh up the options to make a good choice.
Let's look at some example sentences. My sentence is, before buying a car, I need to weigh up the costs. It means that before I decide to buy a car, I will think about how much it will cost. I will look at the price, insurance, and other expenses to decide if buying the car is a good idea.
Now, let me give my example. We weighed up the advantages of moving to a new city before making a final decision. It means that before we decided to move to a new city, we thought about some advantages like new job opportunities and better living conditions, and then we made our choice.
Great explanation. Now, let's hear a short dialogue on how the word is used in a conversation.
So, have you decided whether to take the new job offer?
Not yet. I'm still weighing up the salary and the work hours.
I agree. It's important to weigh up all the details before making a big decision like this.
That was a great dialogue. Weigh up is such a useful phrase when you're making decisions. Don't you think, Eric?
Yes, I agree. It's really helpful when you're thinking about big choices in life, like moving, changing jobs, or even buying something expensive.
Eric, would you say weigh up is more formal or informal?
I think it's pretty neutral. You can use it in both formal and informal conversations. It's a phrase you could use with friends, but also in a work setting when you're discussing options or plans.
That's true, and it's a good phrase for anyone who wants to express that they're thinking carefully about their options.
Yes, it's always important to weigh up your choices before making a decision.
Well, that's all for today's word, weigh up. We've reached the last word of today. So, Eric, what is the last word today?
The last word today is in terms of something. This is a common phrase used to talk about a specific aspect or feature of something. It helps us focus on one part of a bigger topic. For example, if you're talking about a job, you might say in terms of salary, meaning you're only talking about the money part of the job, not other things like the work hours.
So, if you're talking about something, but only want to focus on one part of it, you use in terms of.
Let's look at some example sentences to understand it better. The city is great in terms of public transport. It means that the public transport in the city is really good. So, when you say in terms of public transport, you're only talking about how good the buses and trains are, not other things like restaurants or parks.
That's a good example. Here's mine. The two cars are very similar, but in terms of price, one is much cheaper than the other. It means that when we compare the two cars based on their price, not anything else. We're only looking at prices.
Let's hear an example dialogue about the phrase.
I'm looking for a new laptop. What can you tell me about this one?
Well, in terms of performance, this is the best model.
How about the battery life?
In terms of battery life, it can last up to 10 hours on a single charge.
Sounds great. And in terms of price?
In terms of price, the other one is cheaper.
That was a good example, Lisa. It shows how in terms of helps to focus on specific aspects of the laptop.
Yes, Eric. Well, what would you say about in terms of?
It's very common. You'll hear it a lot in both formal and informal conversations when people want to focus on specific areas of a discussion. It's a good way to break down information and compare things.
I agree. It's a very useful phrase when you're trying to explain something clearly and focus on just one part of the topic. You might hear it at work, in school, or even in everyday conversations about choices or decisions.
Exactly. It's a phrase that works well in many situations, from business meetings to casual chats with friends.
Absolutely. So, next time you want to compare or explain something in a specific way, remember to use in terms of.
That's great advice. Well, I think we have finished the podcast today.
Yes, Eric. I hope our followers found today's episode helpful.
I hope so, Lisa. Okay, thanks for listening. Keep practicing your English.
And stay tuned. Bye for now.